There comes a stage in life when it feels as if every familiar relationship is beginning to fracture. Conversations grow heavy. Family dinners no longer feel warm as they once did. Misunderstandings spread silently. No one says a word yet. Everyone feels a subtle tension that cannot be named. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The most transformative phase of life rarely begins with joy. It begins with disruption, when everything you once believed to be stable starts to fall apart. Family kinship, friendships that once seemed unbreakable suddenly become mirrors reflecting the darkness within you. Envy, hurt, and the longing to be seen. But do not be afraid, because this fracture is not the end. It is an invitation to a new chapter, a stage where the soul is forced to mature. When illusions collapse, what remains is truth. And that truth, though painful, is the beginning of the most beautiful part of your life. In every family, there exist invisible emotional currents. Unspoken debts, subtle comparisons, wounds passed down from generation to generation. Jung called this the collective unconscious. It doesn't live in words, but in glances and silences, in who is always expected to take responsibility and who is always forgiven. Some people spend their entire lives carrying emotions that are not their own. They become the peacemakers, always trying to maintain harmony, yet inwardly feeling exhausted. Whenever a sibling or relative blames them, even the smallest comment makes their heart tighten, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear of being misunderstood, excluded, or seen as the different one in the family. But this is the very stage Jung called individuation, the process of becoming an individual. The soul must separate from the collective patterns to realize that true love does not come from pleasing others, but from daring to live authentically. When you start to notice the conflict between who you truly are and the role you play in your family, don't see it as a crisis. See it as a signal. Your soul preparing to enter a new chapter. This stage is often the most confusing, because when you begin to awaken, the world around you no longer feels familiar. Those who once understood you may now seem distant. Conversations become heavy because you no longer wish to take part in complaints, blame, or arguments that go nowhere. You quietly step back, not out of arrogance, but because inner peace has become more important than being right. And then one day you realize not everyone is meant to walk beside you on the path of awakening. Some will say you've changed, become cold or distant. Spas. But in truth, you're simply shedding the old role, the one who always endured, always explained, always tried to save every relationship. Jung said that when a person faces their shadow, the world around them often reacts intensely. Light always exposes what has been hidden. So if you feel lonely, even among family, it is not punishment, it is transformation. That loneliness is the sacred space where your soul learns to stand firm, no longer leaning on others' approval, but on your own inner strength. There comes a moment in the journey of awakening when you realize you no longer want to argue, not because you've given up, but because you understand that everyone can only see life through the level of consciousness they've reached. A brother may react in anger, a sister in silence, a relative with hurtful words, not because they are cruel, but because they have never been taught how to face their own shadow. You can see it clearly. The wounds they try to hide reveal themselves in the way they treat others. When someone has not healed, they unconsciously inflict pain to lighten the burden of their own heart. And if you are not mindful, you absorb that pain and carry it as if it were your own. But this is the turning point of spiritual awakening. When you learn to observe without reacting, When you can witness anger, criticism, or coldness and still remain peaceful within you, are crossing the threshold of true spiritual maturity. Not to separate yourself, but to understand that sometimes love means knowing when to stop and choosing not to participate in someone else's repeating wounds. Eventually, you will understand that not every relationship is meant to stay with you for life, and that this is not loss. Jung once said, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you begin to see your own darkness clearly, relationships that were sustained only by habit or fear begin to dissolve. Sometimes it's a family member you've been close to for years. Sometimes it's a friend who once felt like your own blood. Their departure hurts deeply, but if you look closer, you'll see their soul is helping yours learn a greater lesson. That true love is not attachment, but freedom. When you stop trying to keep everything intact, you give others permission to be themselves, and you too become free. No more persuading, no more needing to be understood. You simply accept that some chapters are complete, and in that silence, a new chapter begins, lighter, calmer, and free of emotional debt. This is not an ending, but a rebirth. Every soul must learn to let go of the old to make space for the new light to enter. One day you will realize the relationships that hurt you the most were the very ones that pushed you closest to awakening. They were mirrors reflecting the parts of yourself you once refused to see. The brother who made you feel inferior might be reflecting your own fear of being judged. The younger sibling who constantly demands and complains might be showing you the part of yourself that still hasn't learned to set boundaries. The relative who criticizes you endlessly may simply embody the inner voice of judgment you've long directed toward yourself. None of them are the villains in your story. They are merely playing their roles in a script your soul designed to help you evolve. And once you see that resentment begins to dissolve, replaced by gratitude. Gratitude for how they helped you recognize the places within that still needed light. The places still waiting to be healed by awareness. At that moment, darkness is no longer the enemy. It becomes the teacher, showing you how to release, forgive, and love with greater maturity. Not the sweet knave kind of love, but the wise kind. The love that knows no one can truly hurt you once you've learned never to betray yourself again. As you walk far enough along this path, you begin to understand. Not everyone is meant to walk through the same doorway with you. Some souls come only to awaken something within you, and then they leave. The hardest part is not losing them. It's learning how not to lose yourself in the process. Carl Jung once said, "There is no awakening without pain. Darkness doesn't disappear when you avoid it. It merely changes its form. And sometimes that form is the very people you love the most. They test your patience, stir your old wounds, and force you to face the unhealed parts within yourself. But when you can look at them through the eyes of understanding instead of judgment, your heart begins to open. You no longer fall into the roles of a victim or savior. You simply see that everyone is trying, each in their own way, to find their way home to themselves. And in that moment, you touch a higher form of love, a love that does not need to control, does not need to explain. It simply understands and lets go gently. Then one day you wake up feeling different, not because someone else has changed, but because you have. The things that once hurt you no longer shake you. The people who once made you angry now only stir compassion. When you look at them, you no longer see the one who caused me pain, but a soul still struggling within their own darkness. That is the clearest sign of spiritual maturity. When you no longer need to win to be understood or to hear an apology, because you've already made peace with the past. Every wound has become a doorway, and behind each doorway is a new part of you. Deeper, calmer, more authentic. Jung once wrote, "No one can become light until they have walked through their own hell." And now you understand this journey was never about changing others. It was about finding your way back to yourself. When you walk through fear, you not only heal yourself, but also become a light for those still lost in their own darkness. And that's when you know you are truly beginning the most beautiful chapter of your life.